on quite soon. He worked with CNN and has done a myriad of things, and he's the ADC, the media project coordinator. We have Adam here, who is a LA Times reporter and a journalist. And I'll be introducing everyone. They'll be introducing themselves, actually, as soon as we get rolling. And then me, I don't really, I'm a professor who teaches art, painting, drawing, but my students have had to learn how to write short and long things about art, other people's art, their own art. They've had to learn to describe it, and the requirements, even in teaching a studio course, is that the students have to write. And so I have a bit of experience in an exercise that we'll share at the end of each of our presentations. And I think maybe we should get started with Adam, and then Ali can, when he joins in, he can talk about himself a little bit and his experiences. Thank you, Adam.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I'm Adam El-Maharik. I'm a reporter at the LA Times. I've been reporting actually in Orange County for a long time, 5 or 6 years. I was with a little news outfit called Voice of Orange County, Voice of OC, and then I moved on to the LA Times, where we've been doing just a lot of investigative reporting lately on the oil spill, but everything else. I could tell you about my experiences in the newsroom, how we interact with stories that affect our community, what it's like to discuss those stories in the newsroom, what it's like when we're discussing feedback on those kinds of stories in the newsroom, but I'm not sure if we want to get into all that yet. Okay. You know, I think that it's no secret that the American news is biased against Arab Americans, Muslim Americans, biased on the issue of Palestine. That's not a secret. There are things that Arab journalists, Muslim American journalists have been trying to do in newsrooms across the country, and I've been part of that in trying to fix some of the bias, but we need participation of the community as well. Newsrooms are very political in their nature. They're very reactive to outside pressure from people in the community. So if our voices aren't being heard, if we're not writing to the local publication, to the national publication, if we're not calling them, making sure their phone lines are busy with our voices, then things are going to get slanted against us. So that's what I'll say for now.
Okay, you can talk a little bit more perhaps about language, since we don't have Ali up yet, unless...
I'm here.
Oh, Ali, I thought I'd see a large face of yours up.
No,
so go
I've
ahead.
been on. I've been listening to the
I'm
day
sorry.
today.
Discuss your experiences with CNN and the projects that you've worked on. There you are.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Doris. Thank you, Adam. Well, there's an echo there a little bit, but I can just continue on as if I hear nothing. Well, you know, Doris, I said, you know, my name is Ali Yunus, and I am a journalist and a reporter for a long time. I worked for Al Jazeera English in Doha for several years, and I was a reporter there, and I reported on many Arab American stories. And before that, I was with CNN International in Atlanta, and after that, I am back at working with CNN International. I covered the last thing I covered with CNN, the last war in Gaza, and also I write for other publications as well. I mainly cover the Arab American issues, and in addition to the international coverage that I do, especially the wars in the Middle East. The Middle East is a big story, you know, and the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is a dominant story of that conflict. But my latest project was that I worked on, and I'm proud of, was I was one of the 600 investigative journalists who worked on the Pandora papers. I worked on it for months with other journalists. You know, you've heard about it. You know, we uncovered a lot of secrets of the powerful and wealthy, and the famous and the celebrities, and it made big news in the Middle East and around the world, especially in Jordan and Russia and Latin America, so what have you. And I'll follow up where Adam has left off. The newsroom And I mean, I used to write, I worked for the Chicago Tribune or Chicago Sun-Times or other publications, New York Times and all. And, but one thing is, I noticed is that, like what Adam said, as a journalist, I write because I want to see what people think of what my writing or reporting. So if I don't see a feedback, I'm thinking, okay, nobody cared what I wrote, or what I wrote is good. But if I hear a negative comment about what I said or something inaccurate, I take notice. I might change it. I might go back to the editor or the senior management and discuss maybe switch out reporting or let that voice to be heard. And with that in mind, I have always, for many years, urged our community to be proactive and to discuss, what's been said on TV about them or about causes that they care about, whether Iraq, Syria, or Palestine, or anywhere, or any cause that they care about. They need to have their voice heard. They need to be to interact with the news media. And I can speak from experience that I've done the same thing that I am trying to say now. I've done it before many times in Chicago, 20 years ago, and it's successful and it worked. So I leave with that. So let's move on with the session and see how it goes.
Thank you, Ali, so much. I know Adam had a few more words to say, and then I think Ali will go back to you about how you perceive writing a letter to an opinion media.
Yeah, so I would say that one of the most important fronts in trying to restore balance to how newsrooms cover these issues is just the use of language and the restrictions on terminologies that we use in news stories. So one example would be, the use of the word terrorist to describe a Muslim or an Arab who does something terrible. But not using that same label when other non-Arab, non-Muslim people do the same exact things that are also politically or religiously motivated. That's one. On Israel and Palestine, there are so many word restrictions and things you could go through on how they deal with these, with explaining the issue, missing context all over the place that really makes the issue seem biased against us. Doing things like saying that the West Bank is occupied but not East Jerusalem. I've seen that a lot. And, just these basic things that show bias against Palestinians, bias against Arabs. It's really all over the place, and it would be, it really happens a lot because, well, for a lot of reasons, but the more outside pressure we can have against this kind of stuff, the more we can restore balance on these, on coverage of these issues, inshallah.
Thank you, Adam. Ali, do you want to just briefly outline writing a letter to the paper, as we did?
Yes. Yeah, writing a letter to the newspaper is one of the easiest things that you could ever do. It only takes a few sentences. But the first thing is you have to determine if you care about that issue or not. Let's just take the war in Gaza, the last thing that a lot of people in our community, the Arab American community, of all walks of life, so all backgrounds, something that was very emotional. The first thing is you see, for example, Israel defends itself against terrorism and has the right to defend itself. Of course, those are very crafty media messages made by the pro-Israelis defenders or Israeli themselves as well. And if you say, well, and because you see in our Arab networks, you see the picture is flipped. It's the other way around. But how can you express yourself, in a professional manner and in a nice way to explain to them that this coverage is not fair and imbalanced? So the first thing if I would do is, first of all, to explain to them, well, yeah, Israel might have the right to defend itself, but against what? Who is the victim here and who's not? So I would say, dear editor, I've watched your coverage and I'm a big supporter of your organization, or I'm a big reader, I'm a big fan of your ABC network, for example, or LA Times. But what was disheartening for me is the imbalance and the inaccuracy. Here you identified how you feel that is imbalanced or unfair. You say, I understand that you want to defend Israel, right to have a self-defense, but Palestinians do have the right to self-defense too. And the picture is inaccurate that you try to drive here on TV or in a newspaper. So the first thing is to identify the problem and explain it to him that is unfair or imbalanced. So key words is unfair, not balanced, or inaccurate. Those words for a journalist is like a kryptonite for Superman, because, as a journalist, we want to be fair and we want to be balanced, unless you are, really an editorial writer and you're driven by ideology that you want to be unfair or unbalanced. And the second thing, you don't want to denigrate the other party, the other side. You don't want to denigrate Israel, no matter what Israel does, because you want to strive for the bigger issue, for the larger strategy, is that you want to express support for your cause. You want to win the audience. You want to win audience for your cause. The Palestinians are victims here. And at the same time, you don't want to alienate those audience by denigrating Israel or the Jews for that matter. So you have to do it very carefully on these issues. So this is, the basic outline of a letter to the editor. It starts with yourself, identify the problem. If it's inaccuracy, you identify it's inaccurate. You say Jerusalem is not occupied. Jerusalem is occupied, and you could research it. And I could explain that later on, because even as a writer, and I have to dig things up, and I've read many writings by Arabs, by Palestinians. They don't know that Jerusalem is not just 1967 is occupied. All of Jerusalem, the one occupied in 1948 and the one occupied 1967, both are under international law, and nobody's recognized them, both parts of Jerusalem, as Israeli capital. No one, recognized them except, of course, the United States and a couple of other countries. Okay. So you have to be accurate when identifying the problem or identifying the cause that you want to defend.
Thank you so much, Ali. That's very important. So now we begin the portion where you actually write a letter. So there's 2 pieces of large paper, and you don't have to fill those in. Don't be afraid of that. It's just that you need to copy from one to the other. So this is an exercise I've done with my students for many years. And I do it from the point of view of someone who was not a writer, who's not confident with my words necessarily. I mean, I am a writer now and I am more confident, but it took me decades to get to where I am right now. And so my students, who often are the first in their college, in their family to go to college, don't feel confident. And I think most people don't feel confident. So this is a little bit of a confidence building exercise in that you will write down a story about yourself, something perhaps traumatic that has happened to you. As Arab Americans or people of color or whatever, you might want to write about a discriminatory example. And just write it down like 8 to 10 sentences. So this is going to take a little time. So begin now, and then we're going to share with each other some of these stories, and we're going to edit this. 8 to 10 sentences is too much for an op-ed page, but it might take you that long to tell your story. So I would suggest you just write down your experiences. Think a little bit, what could this mean? For my students, it was often like about their braces, getting braces, how traumatic that was. But we want to tap into emotion, and we want to do it in a constructive way. What Ali outlined discusses the issues and gets into the technical aspects, but that doesn't mean if you can't write that well or you don't know your information that you still can't write something, And so write down something, some sort of trauma. It doesn't even have to be about yourself as an Arab American, but here we have an audience where, most of us are Arab Americans, and I would say probably 100% of us have experienced some kind of discrimination, whether it's small or at the grocery store or with any kind of your kid's school or at school, or just something that offended you that you read in the paper and that hurt you. I mean, so write that down in a fairly linear fashion. Just, if it's just 6 sentences, that's okay too. That's still too long for a letter to the editor. And we're going to edit it. So get started. They're telling me I can't get up and move around. Now, what I do in the classroom is get up, move around, start harassing people to do it. So how many people are going to engage in this? Okay. All right, well, that's a fair amount. Go ahead, go for it, guys. You're the heroes. But I wish more of you would engage because it's a very powerful exercise. And it's fun, too, actually. So during this period that you're writing, I feel like I can't speak very much. So let's have like a couple of minutes of silence. And you start writing your story, your trauma memory, whatever it is. Yalla. I'm dying to get up and walk around because that's what I do. I'm like, how come you're not writing? I don't see you writing.
Some of the best writing happens right on deadline because your brain just kind of funnels it and makes it clear. So don't worry about the time, or if you feel like you can't get the words right, just put it on the paper.
I promise you're going to end up with something beautiful and poetic in the next 15 minutes. I promise. Always works. 9 times out of 10, not 100%, but it usually works. And if you want to write about the braces, and they told you it was only going to be 3 years, and it ended up being 7 years, you can write about that too.
You know, I think what most people want, when they write something about, when they see something they care about so deeply, so that's what the motivation comes, kicks in. So they start jumping into writing, because this is when you react to something, the braces, hurting me, I'll write about it. Or the water main broke in my neighborhood, or the power went out, just like it happened in my house last night for long hours. I'm motivated to write about something. So it is something emotional, really, but you have to funnel that emotions into words, and the words has to be also cleaned up later on and edited. And then there's your letter, it's simple. But it starts with the raw material, with the raw emotions. You put it in words, and then you start cleaning up and edit and polish it a little bit more.
Let's have at least maybe just a minute of quiet, and then we'll start talking again. Yeah, if you have questions, pipe up. You need a mic.
Walk over the microphone to him. Oh, okay.
Hi, my name is Nicholas. The question is, I can't do it in 8 sentences. There's some issues that are just, you need more time, you need more, usually when you write in an op-ed, I thought they give you like 200 words or something. So
That's right. You have to focus because maybe you should be writing an opinion piece and not a letter. We're starting with a letter, but maybe yours can turn into an opinion piece. But I think you can still do this. And I wanted to just say that people are often worried about, how do I frame my letter? How do I frame my op-ed piece? And really, it's opinion is the framing. Opinion is a philosophy. Opinion is an emotion. And so those things are very important to write down.
Okay, so an op-ed is a
500 to 750 word essay.
Is an op-ed?
Is an opinion piece.
Oh,
yes.
opinion. But an op-ed is what you're responding to an article in the paper,
Or just an opinion about what's happening. It could be anything you want to write, anything at all, about your community, about your own experiences. But we're starting with a letter.
So this is a, we call this a letter to the editor.
Okay.
So when you're frustrated about something you read in the paper because it was wrong, it was biased, you write a letter to the editor, and it's like 200 words.
Okay, but can I ask
Yeah.
you, one of the problems is getting them to publish it. So that's
You
another
got to
issue.
write lots of letters. I mean, I've been writing letters for 30-something years, and they weren't published right away. And then when we established a relationship with the San Diego Union Tribune, even then our opinion pages were not published often, maybe twice a year. And now, in the last year and a half, because we're all working together, we're all helping each other write our opinion pieces. We've had over 30 published in the last year and a half. So you start out small, you don't give up, and slowly but surely they'll begin to see you as opinion, as writers. They begin to trust you. They begin to understand that maybe you represent your community. And those 30 op-eds were not written by me. They were written, I wrote maybe 4 of them. It was a community, older people, intergenerational, young voices, the spectrum from the Arab American community, including LGBTQ, everybody has written in the San Diego Union Tribune. We'd like to do that for the LA Times and the Orange County Register. And, you know, there's a lot of...
Well, I was just going to give an example of a letter to the editor. Basically, if you watch the news or read newspapers every day, there's something that we can have an opinion on and weigh in on. So, I mean, this is just an example, but I read something this morning and it made me mad. So, dear editor, as the daughter of a Palestinian mother whose family was forced into exile in 1948, I am heartbroken that the ethnic studies program recently approved by the state of California does not address the trauma of the indigenous people in my part of the world, the Palestinians. I urge all teachers who will be putting the ethnic studies program into action to reach out to the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee to more fully understand and appreciate the experience of the Arab American students in your schools.
That's excellent.
That's great. That's perfect.
Bravo.
Here, Adam, take it.
Now you send it in. Now, yeah, go ahead.
I would just say that, you know, every newspaper, and you can go online and it'll say how to submit a letter to the editor. It'll say who to send it to, so the email address, it'll say we need your address, a phone number, a daytime phone number to reach you. They're basically trying to make sure that it's not, you know, somebody blasting a newspaper or with the same form letters and that kind of thing, and they want to make sure that you are who you say you are. But also, I would say it's a good idea to copy the writer of the story if you're responding to a particular story, because it lets that reporter know they're making an impact. Their story was read by somebody and they have an opinion about it, and it might make that reporter think next time, oh, I better, you know, maybe let me get another perspective.
Absolutely.
I mean, they are human beings. They don't know everything.
They're very responsive. In the interest of time, I want to continue the workshop. So now most of you have a little story in front of you. So now take the second sheet of paper and in 4 to 5 sentences, take the best sentences out of your 8 sentences or 10 sentences that you have and list them in the top half of the page. So just take the essential sentences that you have and rewrite them. And then we're done, but we're going to share. And the share, there's a little surprise in the sharing. So who's ready, almost ready to do that? You probably need another minute, or you can even just check off the sentences you wrote already and say, oh, I'll circle the most important sentences, or I'll cross out the ones that aren't important. And then you're ready to do the last step, which is the little surprise in this. This could turn into a creative process, actually, for poetry, for any kind of writing. The main thing is that it'll give you some confidence about your voice. I did not have a confident voice growing up. It took me decades.
Can I share a story, Doris? You know, I started writing letters to the editors in Chicago when I was in my younger years. And then I took it a step forward. I start calling the reporters and take them out, and me and them go have a cup of coffee or lunch, and then their bosses, and then they invited me to this station, and then I brought the community leadership to their ABC or NBC or Fox News to that TV station to discuss our issues. So I just started from a letter to the editor to having relationships with the reporters, to having a relationship with the media bosses. That extended not just in my person, but also for the entire community. So what happened afterward, that whenever there's a story, either in the Middle East or Ramadan or in the community, no matter what that story is, they've started reaching out. But they would not have been reaching out to us without us engaging with them. So a letter to the editor is a step forward and a step you can take, and you can build on it later on to
it's a first,
establish a relationship
these
with your local news
I'm
organization.
so glad you brought that up, Ali, because these relationships take a long time to foster, and it begins with a letter. It begins with a letter. And we all have something to say or we wouldn't be here.
Real quick, I want to just tell a real-life example of how this works, how I've seen it effective. Back when Armenia and Azerbaijan were having a war, we started covering it, and the Armenian community was outraged about how we reported the facts. And we got countless letters, countless phone calls, emails. There were hundreds of Armenians protesting outside the newsroom. Next thing you know, the tone of the coverage completely shifted. I mean, we did stories on how these Armenian war heroes were traveling from the US to go fight for their motherland, this kind of stuff. So if you don't think it works, trust me, it works.
Who's ready to share their story? Okay. You got it down to 4 or 5 sentences? But this is a story based on trauma? Okay. All right, go ahead.
Okay.
I'm just thinking in the interest.
Well, as a pure Palestinian that grew up in Haifa in a Jewish neighborhood, I was often asked if people would ask me if I faced racism. Frankly, I did, but not in the traditional way. I felt whenever I was asked if I was truly an Arab, we were referred to as Arab, not Palestinians. So we grew up being Arab Israelis, not Palestinians. That was always avoided, the word Palestinians. But I would often be asked if I was a true Arab. And the question was, yes, I am. Well, you don't look like one. You don't act like one. You're too smart to be one. Are you sure you don't have any Jewishness in you? So the question is, I was always reminded that you are a Christian, so you're different. So the question is, how does my religion background make me an Arab or not a Palestinian? That's how
Okay.
I felt racism.
Yeah, thank you. That's very, very powerful. Yours is a tough one because it's too long. But the trick is, and don't start changing what you wrote to fit this, the trick is to read it backwards. So start with that question. So you can start with, you can sort of imagine it backwards. And it actually hooks people in. Why is she asking that question? So you can actually change the linear quality. Now you're engaging in an idea. So and thank you so much. Does anyone else is ready to share? Now you know you're going to read it backwards. You're going to read it forwards and you're going to read it backwards. Nobody? Go ahead, Yasmin.
So I took a different approach in style. This is another take on a letter I wrote recently that I still feel like I haven't gotten all the words out.
Okay.
It says, I think of you every now and then and the impact your discriminative actions made on my life. I'm still angry at you. I used a different word there. Congrats on selling your business. You'll no longer have to worry about the threat of displaying racialized art in your windows. More importantly, other artists of color will not have the deep misfortune to meet you. I hope you think of me from time to time and that my words keep you up at night.
All right. You want to start with the last sentence and go backwards?
Sure.
It would have to be changed. Yeah, go ahead. Read
Okay.
read it backwards.
I hope you think of me from time to time and that my words keep you up at night. Each sentence backwards, right?
Yeah, just
Okay. More importantly, other artists of color will not have the deep misfortune to meet you. Congrats on selling your business. You'll no longer have to worry about the threat of displaying racialized art in your windows. I'm still angry at you. I think of you every now and then and the impact your discriminative actions made on my life.
Okay. Someone else would thank you. You notice how doing it backwards kind of makes it a little more poetic and it gets your attention maybe a little quicker. Does someone else want to speak? Yes. Oh, Jenny.
Should I just read it? Okay.
Read it linearly, the way you wrote it, and then read it backwards.
Okay. Standing in the large room lined with soldiers, I stared at their multitude of guns and thick uniform, the same color as my family's olive trees. The soldier yelled at my mom, "Don't lie, why are you coming into Israel?" Palestine, I heard my 8-year-old self say, followed by, "My mom doesn't lie." I both saw and felt the rifle twitch in my direction, and as if time stopped, my mother stepped in front of me.
So now read it, reverse it.
I both saw and felt the rifle twitch in my direction, and as if time stopped, my mother stepped in front of me. Palestine, I heard my 8-year-old self say, followed by, "My mom doesn't lie." The soldier yelled at my mom, "Don't lie, why are you coming into Israel?" Standing in the large room lined with soldiers, I stared at their multitude of guns and thick uniform, the same color as my family's olive trees.
Both were powerful, in my opinion. Both the more linear or they were both very powerful. But it just offers you an opportunity to find that framing. I think it's very beautiful. Anyone else want to share? And you know, if your story isn't as like significant, that's actually what I'd like to see, because you could see how reversing the order transforms a very simple, bland statement even.
You know, can I say something, Doris?
Of course.
You know, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Speak.
You know, what I heard is beautiful. They are beautiful prose, you know, and I think it was Yasmin. It was psychological in a way. Like I want to make sure I lock my doors and windows when I hear these words. If somebody wrote them to me, but for a letter to the editor, I think we have to focus on the fact. You want to challenge what the article said or the reporter on air is saying. You said, you know, you said that Arab Americans are they're not paying taxes in Orange County. You challenge those facts as Arab American citizens, are citizens of this country. They have been law-abiding citizens. They pay taxes. So you challenge the facts, you know, and then you talk about the background, the context of why you're writing this letter. And also want to add, if anybody is interested, you know, to write opinion letters, but they're not, you know, quite sure that it could go with the let's say LA Times or New York Times, you know, Ray Hanania, a friend of mine, journalist from Chicago, and I have established the Arab Daily News. It's a website for Arab Americans, and if somebody's interested to write opinions, you know, just to get their name out in Google or to practice opinion, will be happy to, have them publish their opinions or their letters or whatever they want to. And we get their pictures in, they get their names in, and it's something that, until they feel confident, they can start writing to other publications in the mainstream media.
Yeah, I mean, the formats, of course, they need to be edited and reworked, and usually about an article you read in the paper, of course. But I just want you to understand that your experiences are powerful, and there's lots of ways to make them even more so. So let's hear the last example over there.
Thank you, Doris. I am a Palestinian American woman working in Hollywood. I am constantly faced with discrimination. I had to lie about my heritage in order to get the job. During the end of a positive job interview, I was, in fact, offered the job. The EP asks me, "Where are you from? Your name sounds different." Feeling positive, I said, "I'm Palestinian." I didn't get the job. So I started lying about where I'm from, which led me to feel shame and disgrace. That was 15 years ago. Now, even though I'm cautious about disclosing where I'm from, I tell the truth.
Very good. So read it backwards. It's a little long, again, but this is a first step.
Start from the very end.
Yes.
I tell the truth, even though I'm cautious about disclosing where I'm from. 15 years ago, I was feeling shameful and disgraced. I didn't get the job because I was lying. During a job interview, it's hard. It's hard to do that. Okay, I think I see what you're saying. It's long. You're right. Okay.
Yeah, you can skip some more sentences. You can edit at any time. You can start over again at any time.
Yeah,
You're the
it's
boss.
long. You gave too much narrative.
That's okay. Keep reading it backwards.
Okay. I was offered a job, and then it was taken away because of where I'm from. Constantly being faced with discrimination in an industry that's saturated with non-Palestinian women, I dealt with discrimination regularly.
That's excellent. And it works. It could work both ways, It's just a way of capturing maybe your poetic voice. This frames the letter. Of course, it needs to be worked on some more. It needs to refer to something the paper wrote. And I maybe we have time for one more, as long as it's short. I think anybody else want to participate in this? We can probably go 3 more minutes, but yeah, go ahead.
Ollie, my name's Nicholas. I want to ask you, Ollie, about the discrimination that in your line of work and that in Adam and Doris, the discrimination that was just blatant against Helen Thomas, that when you're a journalist and you're covering these things, then the Zionists want to come after you. So can you address the unfairness that Helen Thomas experienced? You're in Washington, D.C., I assume, so if you wanted to take that on. If not, then you have my permission to call me.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happened to Helen Thomas is horrible. And it's a minefield for any Arab American journalist, Palestinian American journalists especially. It's something, I actually haven't reported on the issue personally. I've not been a foreign correspondent. I've not reported on Israel-Palestine. I've kind of avoided it just because it's painful and the bias is so obvious, and I don't want some editor telling me I need to write this and that I just can't agree with. So personally, I haven't even, as a journalist, I haven't even touched it. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Ali, are you still with us?
Like I said, what Adam said, what happened to Helen Thomas, it happened to a lot of us, on different levels and different variant. But you know, I've covered the international news and the foreign news. From my experience, I see a lot of people like in the newsroom. They try to be fair, they try to be balanced, but a lot of times it's the leadership or the policy of the news organization that dictates where this coverage is going to. For example, when we cover a war in Israel and Palestine or in the Arab world, you tend to see, you know, a lot of pro-Israeli voices there and little Palestinian or pro-Palestinian voices. And this is not always discriminatory or not always intended as a discrimination. A lot of times, you know, I had a hard time in the past to finding, you know, people who could speak English and could, you know, present the Palestinian voice, you know. At the same time, the Israelis or the pro-Israeli voices are extremely active. And when I say extremely, that's even an understatement. Because, for example, in Jerusalem, the Israeli army has an office in a building that all the news media there. So they knock on the door, and all the international news media with the CD, with a statement, they are always ready and available to speak. Whereas for members of our community, you know, not so much available. Even it's less in Palestine because it's, you know, international news, it's English.
Yeah,
But
thank you,
racism
Ali.
there-
We're actually run out of time. I'm so sorry to cut you off
Sure.
like that. I just want to conclude by saying that, you know, your voices matter. Maybe Helen Thomas, if we had writers writing even the most illiterate letters to the editor, her legacy would have been salvaged. And now it's work we have to continue to work on now. So just believe in your voices and keep writing and get help. I got lots of help. I can't tell you, my poor husband, he helped me with my writing. It took me decades to write, to learn how to write. But begin and believe in your voices, believe in your stories, and that'll carry you there.
Can I refer to just one last resource before we wrap up? There was a letter to the editors of in all the United States, written by a group of journalists regarding Palestine. This was during the war on Gaza recently, and it was written by a group of journalists to journalists. So this is written by people who know how journalists think, the kinds of things they're gonna react to, what will make them listen. It's only about 600 or 700 words. I really urge you to look it up because it's fact-based. It addresses the points clear, head-on. And if you want to write an op-ed, I think this is a really good template to go by. It's not there's not an official name, but if you Google, you know, journalists open letter on Palestine, you'll find it. Yeah.
All right, we can continue sharing our letters later. So thank you so much. And next is a legislative agenda run by Chris.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Doris. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Ali. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
So, I don't know if I officially introduced myself. My name is Chris Habibi. I am ADC's Legislative and Policy Coordinator. I help advocate before the Hill, before the Biden administration, work with coalition partners. I'm joined by ADC's National President, Sam Micallef. He is awesome. And so what I'm going to do for the next half hour, 45 minutes, I'm going to give an update what ADC's been doing on the legislative side, talk about how best members of the public can engage with their members. And then we'll have a Q&A. You can ask me, Sammer, any questions you may have about policies on the federal level, and we'll do our best to answer them. So, Sammer?
Okay, there we go. Yeah, I'm gonna sort of defer a lot of this over to Chris, since he's our new guy on the Hill, and he's been doing a tremendous job there for us. But I think this session is very important just to give you guys, everybody, a sense of what's going on the Hill, and two, how best each individual can engage and help us, because our voice is only as strong as your voice. If we don't have concerted effort from our membership, then our voice is sort of a little diminished. So the more people we have contacting the members of Congress, the more power we have. So hopefully we can have a good session and we could get you guys more engaged.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I joined ADC the beginning of June, and since then my main goal has been to significantly increase our presence on the Hill, before members of Congress, before the Biden administration, and working with our coalition and organizational partners. The two biggest things that I want to let you guys know about: first, appropriate for the Alex Odeh Memorial Conference and Gala, we were able to have Representative Lou Correa, who represents the district that Alex lived, worked, and died in, introduce a resolution that recognized Alex, that named him for who he was, a civil rights hero. Thank you. Recognized him as a victim of domestic terrorism, and that his killers have not been brought to justice, despite us knowing with pretty high confidence who they are. So that was really, really big. As part of that strong push for justice, ADC sent a letter to Attorney General Merrick Garland, specifically asking questions about the investigation, because we haven't had an update. The bar is literally on the ground, so they have done absolutely nothing. And as well, on the Hill, we're looking to have the first hearing on Alex's case since 1986. So ADC was joined by almost 24 other organizations in asking Chairman Jerry Nadler for a hearing. And we're going to continue in the weeks to come to push for justice. The other big goal for me is to have the Arab American community recognized by the federal government as a distinct and unique community. That means that Arab businesses have the opportunity that is provided to minority businesses, both in terms of resources and grants before the Minority Business Development Agency, but also we've seen that there are gaps in the way that the federal government collects data. And that's how they make their decisions. They make their decisions based on the numbers. And if Arab Americans aren't shown to be a distinct and unique group, and we're lumped in with white Caucasian, then the federal government doesn't know what's going on, what our issues are. So when the National Institute of Health does a study, if there is no distinct category for our community, then the federal government won't be able to justify resources that are needed for our community. So those are the two big tasks. I've been doing other advocacy before Congress, working on eliminating a federal program called 1033. It's a program that allows the military to sell weapons, tanks, to local law enforcement at incredibly reduced prices, militarizing our law enforcement, and this program, it needs to be eliminated. And so ADC has joined with a coalition of a diverse coalition of organizations to work towards eliminating that program. So that's what we've been doing. Now I want to tell you guys how you can engage with your member. There are the two primary ways to engage with your member of Congress, whether that be your district representative in the House of Representatives or your state representative in the Senate. The first is meeting. You set up a meeting either with the member themselves or with their staff. And you shouldn't feel that if you reach out to the member and they say, member is scheduled, there's no time for him or her to meet, that it's any sort of disrespect. The staff are incredibly important. They're the ones that will influence your member. So if you reach out and you get offered a chance to meet with staff, take it. It is such a great way to educate staff who can then go and influence their boss to change their words and their actions in a positive way. And I've put together, a 2-page memo that anyone can, we'll send it around, we'll we'll share it around. It gives easy steps. You know, you get a group together. A good example is our Orange County chapter was able to meet with Congresswoman Katie Porter. And before we had that meeting, we sat down, laid out what our priorities are. What do we want to talk with the Congresswoman about? And then when we met with her, we were able to very specifically ask her and talk to her about our issues. And by doing that, you're able to engage with the member, get them to understand, but also answer. And so that's one way you can engage with your member. The other, when you have something very specific, something that is immediate that you need your member to do. For example, anytime we send out an action alert, that's an example of something specific and immediate. So with the resolution honoring Alex, you know, you can call your member if they haven't already co-sponsored and ask them to co-sponsor. And it's so simple, you don't even need to have the specific number for your representative's office. The House of Representatives and the Senate have switchboards. You call the one number, you tell them where you live, and they will direct your call to your member, and you can either speak with a staffer. Sometimes if there's no staffer there, you'll leave a message, but all you have to do is introduce yourself, your name, where you're from, so that they know you're a constituent, and then say, it is very important to me and our community that you co-sponsor this resolution honoring a civil rights hero. And by doing that, that matters. That will move members to do something that they may not have done otherwise. If they listen, if there's a 50, 25 calls, that gets noted. And that staffer then goes to their boss and says, Congresswoman, Congressman, Senator, we've gotten a lot of calls asking for you to support this. I think we should do it. Your constituents are asking for it. So it's a very simple, quick way for you to have an impact on federal legislation. And the last thing that I want to update, let everyone know, ADC has partnered with Michelle Obama's When We All Vote initiative. And that's a nonpartisan voter registration, voter education program. And ADC has set up its own dedicated website through When We All Vote, where any member of our community can go out. They can go to this website, see if they're registered. If they're not, learn how to, and engage. It is so important for our community to become a voting bloc, and we don't always have to vote the same way. But if we all show that we are engaged politically and we vote, then politicians will have to take us seriously. They will have to take our issues seriously, because we are a group of people that will go out and vote. If a politician does something that our community does not agree with, they will face consequences at the ballot box. And that is so important to know and to show. And that's why we've partnered with When We All Vote to make sure that our community is registered and active when it comes to Election Day. Samar, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yes, I do. Just to let everybody know, I know a lot of you are seasoned professionals at this, but some of you aren't. When you want to engage in the political game, there are three ways to do it. The most basic way is to register and vote. At a minimum, everybody needs to do that. My personal view, if you're not registered and you don't vote, then I don't think you have a right to complain. Okay? Because you're not doing anything to fix the situation. All you're doing is complaining. Okay? The second way you can engage is to actually volunteer for a campaign. And it's very easy. Campaigns want more people to go there. Knock on the door, say, hello, my name is so-and-so. I live here. I like what your candidates has to say. I want to help out. And that could be simply as making phone calls, going around knocking on doors. But that does two things. One, it shows our community is engaged. But two, it allows you to meet those staffers working on that campaign. It allows you to establish that relationship with those campaign workers. And that's important. Why? Because those young campaign workers eventually, possibly, become candidates themselves. And if they've known you from the beginning and they've established that relationship with you, okay, it's, the way I look at it, it's very easy to hate somebody that you don't know, okay? But when you personally know that person, it's a lot harder to stereotype them. It's a lot harder to hate them. So when the news does break, a bunch of, somebody goes up to them and say, oh, Arabs are just a bunch of terrorists or a bunch of this or a bunch of that. Well, they sit to themselves, well, wait a minute. I know so-and-so. They're Arab. They're nothing like that. So it's important to establish that sort of personal relationship with the staffers, the campaign people, and the elected officials. Everybody assumes, oh, you got to go to the candidate. That's the best way to do it. Not really. Need to establish the relationships at all levels. And it's important that you do this not just with the people that are running for Congress or Senate, but also with the people that are running for the school boards and the city council, and because politics is a ladder. First, you get elected to a school board, then you get elected to a city council, you may become mayor, mayors become congressmen, congressmen become senators, so on and so forth. Well, if you knew that person when they were running for the school board and you established that connection, it helps you and gives you a leg up when that person decides to run for Congress or to senator. So they know you personally, and they knew that you helped them when they were starting out. So those are very important. The third way is also probably one of the easiest ways, and that is to write a check. You write a check. That's also a way of engaging the political structure. Now, I know a lot of people aren't able to do that, but sometimes even if you give $5 or $10, it's sufficient. If you hold little fundraisers for somebody who's running for a school board and you raise a few $100s for that person, that's a big sum for a school board member or a judge. Okay, so it's important to engage. And it's also important to engage, and this is very key, not just when they do something you don't like. Our community has a habit or a tendency to only reach out to the candidates when they do something that makes you angry or what you don't like. It's important to do positive reinforcement. So when they do something that you do like, pick up that phone and say, I want to thank the congressman for doing X, Y, and Z, and I support him for doing that. Okay? Because as Chris was saying, they count. They count every call that comes in, whether it's pro or anti. And the one thing I hear across the board from a lot of the staffers I know, we get a lot of calls from the opposition. We don't get many calls from your community. Okay? All you gotta do is pick up the phone, dial the number, say, I'm so-and-so, I support this bill, and I want the congressman person to support this bill as well. Or I oppose this bill, and I want the congressperson to oppose this bill. That's it. That's all you gotta do. They'll mark it down, 1 for, 1 against. So that's key. It's key that you make your voice heard with the staffers, with the members of Congress, and do so, even when you're angry, always stay polite. Don't let your anger get away from you, and do not insult anybody. Okay? Those are key. Even if you're telling them that you don't like what they're doing, do it with a smile, okay? And do it in a positive manner.
That's such a great point, Samer. So part of my background, I used to work on campaigns, and one of the mantras that we always had when we were making phone calls is smile while you dial. You can hear it on the phone. You know when somebody is smiling. Their voice changes. The way that they are emoting, it changes. Even if you're angry, if you have a smile on your face, you can hear it. So that's so important, and to remember that these staffers are humans, that they aren't the ones going out there saying or doing whatever it is that you're angry about. And you don't need to always have every single fact and know everything to the minute detail. it can be as simple as, I support this and I want your boss to support it as well. Or I disagree with this and I'm urging your boss to vote no on this, or to not support it the way that they have. It can be a discussion. If you have the information, you can talk to them about it. But don't feel that just because you don't know every intimate detail, that means that you can't call, because that's just not true. And these staffers appreciate every call, especially the ones that are polite. I went to school in Washington, D.C. A lot of my friends interned on Capitol Hill. They're the ones that answer the phone calls, undergraduate college students. And, the ones that they bring home are either the ones that are incredibly rude and make them very disheartened to be working on Capitol Hill, but they also come back, and if they're super happy, it's because somebody called and was polite to them. Even if they were disagreeing, if they're polite, those staffers remember. And that makes a world of difference when it comes to trying to influence how Congress, how our elected officials act. If they see us as polite but firm, strong but rational, that will change minds, and that's so important. So at this point, we can turn to question and answer, community town hall. What issues do you have? What questions? What do you want to know about what's going on Capitol Hill, and any particular policy issue? Let's see if we can find somebody to hand out. Turn around the mic. Is this one on? Perfect.
Caught your eye first. Marhaba, assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much. I guess more than a question, I have a comment on our community. So everything you're saying is great. The point of doing fundraisers and donating, etc. I think if you could maybe address this from a strategic point of view, not just doing it, right? Because I was invited to several of those fundraisers in our community, and these were disasters in my view. I'll tell you why. Because they bring a candidate, they don't research the candidate, they don't prepare questions for the candidate, but they are so adamant at unseating the opposition. For example, in our community of Temecula Valley, they wanted so bad to unseat Ken Calvert, who is a terrible, of course, Republican, very Zionist. But the problem is when they invited Joy Silver, who was actually running against him 2 or 3 years ago, I can't remember, when they invited her to the house of one of our community members, and I was there, they basically told her, they started collecting the money and told her basically, like, we want you to unseat him. They didn't engage in asking her about her positions in terms of all the important issues for our community. They didn't press her on it. Basically, they gave her the impression that, no, we don't care what you believe in or what you do, as long as you unseat him, we will support you. And I think this is a grave mistake, and we are paying the price of such tendencies. Let me give you a more important example, which is Katie Porter, because in the proximity of, where we are, of Irvine, many in the community know her. They did fundraisers for her. They hosted her. They even brought her to one of the fundraisers for Rashida Tlaib that I attended, I think, 3 years ago before COVID. And they gave her crazy money without ever actually pressing her on any issues or having a dialogue with her about her positions. And I think a group of Arab American doctors gave her $70,000 in one fundraising, where she stayed for 15 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. I think she did it even on Zoom. And she did all of that in the committee. And now look at her voting record. Look at the fact that she's refusing over and over to meet with anyone from the Arab American or Muslim American community. She absolutely evades them. And she is refusing to sign on a very basic bill, which is the Betty McCollum, the Palestinian children. I can't remember what is the number, but yes, thank you. I think just doing it without a strategy, without actually knowing how to, maybe you should address this in details. Thank you.
Okay.
I do agree with you, and this is what we in a community tend to do, is that we lack follow-up. We lack the ask. We're so caught up in, let's do this, let's have a fundraiser, let's have a meeting, and then once it's over, that's it. Khalas, now we're done. We did our part. It is the follow-up. Yes, write the check, but you also must hold the person accountable. Well, I'm talking about after, and then I'll get back. That you must hold them accountable. Don't assume that you wrote the check. That's it. That you're done. Your responsibilities end with the signature on the check, and that's it. You need to hold them responsible for this. Beforehand, and this is sometimes a proper. You got to have to know how to hold a proper fundraiser. People like to, they like to hold a fundraiser because they want to, bishufu halam. They want to, show off type of situation. Yes, I hosted so and so as a fundraiser. Well, that's good and that's great, but did you do the research? And a lot of times, we do fundraiser back candidates that are fringe candidates that have no shot at winning. So strategically, you have to look at who you're doing the fundraiser for. And I think everything's about strategy when it comes to politics. Who am I fundraising for? Is this person the best person for me to support? What are the person's positions? Not just on Palestine and Palestine, but also overall record. And we have to look at that at across the board, because there, this whole idea of being progressive on everything but Palestine. So we have a lot of these candidates that are get elected. Progressively, they're great, except for Palestine. So we have to decide amongst ourselves: do we support somebody like that, or do we not support somebody like that? And that's a strategic question. But anytime we go into anything we do and who we support, we have to look at the long-term picture. Do it in a professional manner, and then follow up. Do the follow up. Now, did you want to?
Yeah, a couple things to build off that's a great. That follow up is so important. I think that strategically, especially when it comes to seats that are held by Republicans that are very unlikely to support us on anything, we have to consider what is the alternative. If we don't support a Democrat who may or may not be with us on the issues that we want, is it better to have somebody who will never meet with us, never care to think about our community, or somebody who at least might? So that's part of that strategy as well. On Katie Porter specifically, I appreciate you raising the concerns about her support, her lack of support for HR 2590, which prohibits security assistance to Israel that will go towards harming Palestinian women and children. It is an issue that it is important to our entire community. It's something that we are pushing hard on the Hill. When ADC OC was able to, we met with Katie Porter. I was able to join that meeting with them. We raised that, and her response was interesting. So the way that she responded to our ask for support on that bill was, I agree with the effort. I agree that we need to do a better job of addressing security assistance across the world. And she actually directed her staff to meet with me, and then I've met with her staff. We've started to build a coalition so that we can do something to address security assistance. That's military aid around the world. And that includes military assistance to Israel. So when we talk about it, we also need to understand that these politicians, particularly ones like Katie Porter, think about it. It's not that she has disregarded it, she doesn't think about it, she hasn't processed it. And I understand frustration, and I understand that, we want her to be on the other side of this bill. But we also have to take into account the larger strategy of what we're trying to do. And I 100% take all of that and I internalize it and I think about it and I appreciate it.
Well, just real quick, just before we end, I just want to give one little caveat. The ADC does not support a specific candidate or a specific party. We're nonpartisan. So if we talk positively about a candidate or negatively about a candidate, that doesn't mean we're advising you to support or not support that individual. That's totally up to you.
My lawyer taking care of me.
So my question relates to the census. And so I know many organizations have been working very hard over the past few years around the census. And you're one of the probably very few organizations working on the census related to Arab Americans. I did not hear anything about, okay, what happened? So were we successful? How many Arabs do we have in the US?
Okay. So ADC has been one of the major Arab American national organizations working on the issue of getting Arab Americans as a category on the census. And I think Chris touched upon this earlier, the idea of being recognized. We are the invisible minority. In other words, we feel the effect of discrimination, but we never get any of the benefits that the government puts forth to help those minorities. We are, by definition, according to the OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, we are by definition Caucasian. I mean, it's specifically in their regs that if anybody lists themselves as Arab or any of the Arab countries, you are Caucasian. What does that mean? Well, according to the US government, Dearborn is 90% white. Right. That's the actual effect of what this is. Dearborn, which is majority Arab American, is classified as white. Okay? So we have been, this has been a decades-long fight. A decades-long fight in trying to get Arabs recognized as a distinct group. This past census, we were very successful in getting it onto the census, post or pre-Trump era. The census had essentially told us that they were going to put it on the census, that there was going to be a MENA category. A MENA category is not the best category, but it was the best way we could compromise to get something on there. And that was, we were told it was a done deal, 95%, it's good. And in fact, that the OMB was looking at splitting off Arabs out of the Caucasian category and giving us our own category. It was almost pretty much a done deal. Then Donald Trump came, and everything was off the table. They reversed everything and basically went back to the census of 2010 and took us off of there. Okay? But we did get sort of what I say, they threw us a bone, little, hick. And what they did was, and it's not just for the Arabs, but for all groups, they allowed you to self-identify yourself. So you could put white, black, other, and then they give you, how do you identify yourself? So you were able to then put down Lebanese, Palestinian, Libyan, however you want to identify yourself. What does that mean is at the end of the day, we are still going to be lumped into the white, but there's still a way to figure out how many Arab Americans there is, because what is the census? The census is just a database. That's all it is. So you can go in and search that database and say, I want everybody that identified as Palestinian, everybody identified as Lebanese, and just add them all up and come up with a number. Now, is that number accurate? Probably not, because what happened with the Trump administration and their insistence on putting a citizenship question on the census, it scared the bejesus out of every minority, and a lot of minorities were scared about what was going to happen with that data, and a lot of them did not fill out the census. So, and we're seeing that ramifications not just within our own community, but that ramifications is happening with the redistricting. The ramifications is happening with the reallocation of House seats. So some states that shouldn't have lost a seat, lost a seat. Some states that should have gained a seat, didn't gain a seat. So that's sort of the downside. Now, we are still at square one now, and we are going to be pushing the MENA category again. So inshallah, in 2030, it will be on there. So because everything was delayed, the census has not, they've put out certain numbers, but they have not put out, or they haven't opened up the database for you to get those numbers specifically on racial and ethnic categories just yet. That they are working on that, and they will, but they were so concentrated on getting out the numbers for redistricting because that was required by statute. In fact, they were late on that. So that's what they're still working on, and they're still working on the quality control right now. So they will be coming.
It's perfect. Okay, so thank you so much for this great discussion. This is something I'm very passionate about. I'm going to ask you a question, and then I'm just going to go on with the other comments I want to make, if that's okay with you. Number one, so there's this thing with our community that we do get caught up with Palestine. I'm not saying Palestine is not important because I'm Palestinian, and it's like the #1 topic in my heart, but I've learned how to kind of play with that a little bit. What do you think about the concept of, it's okay, let's just support the candidate that's the lesser of two evils? What would you say? Would you agree with that or not?
That's the toughest question that you can probably ask. Look, and this goes back to something I said earlier. We have. I mean, they're well known. The so-called progressives, and they're great on issues regarding minority rights. They're great on issues regarding women's rights. They're great on issues regarding a whole myriad of things. But we stop at Palestine. We stopped at Palestine. And so we have to decide individually, what do we do about those people? Katie Porter could be one of them. Do we say we're going to just totally ignore that person? I'll give you another example. The latest incident, or latest Israel aggression towards Gaza and towards the West Bank, and even towards their so-called Palestinian Israeli citizens, opened up a lot of eyes for a lot of members of Congress. Okay, a lot of the people that normally would never criticize Israel all of a sudden started saying, wait a minute, this is wrong. One person in particular, I'm from New Jersey, is my senator, Senator Menendez. Senator Menendez is the chair of the Foreign Relations Committee. Senator Menendez, even though is Cuban, is one of the biggest pro-Israel hawks in the Senate. Period. Well, he came out and criticized the attack that Israel had begun. And he said, well, wait a minute, what's going on here? And he questioned it. He also said in that same statement that Israel has a right to defend itself. Okay? So for me, I thought that to get the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, who's a pro-Zionist, to come out and actually question an action of Israel, I thought was a significant step. A step. It's not great, but it's a step. Politics is a game of steps. Excuse me? A game of inches, literally. So you have to slowly move the bar, slowly move the bar. You're not going to flip somebody. There's no light to turn on. There's no magic word statement you're going to be able to make to that person. Say, oh, wow, you're right. I was wrong. I now agree with you 100%. So it's kind of, so we have to take everything incrementally, I think. And I think whether we support somebody because they're great on everything but is a personal decision that you have to make. I know some people will say absolutely not. They're very ideological, and we're not going to support. But if that's the tactic you're going to take, you're going to. I think it hurts us sort of in the long run, because you got to constantly make inroads with people. You got to constantly move them. And eventually, hopefully they will come towards you. You're about to say something else, I could tell.
Yes, so, okay, well, thank you very much. I agree with you, but it took me time. I've worked on advocacy on various issues when it comes to Palestine, Muslim Americans, Arab Americans, women, immigrants for over 20 years. And I've realized that we tend to have our community an all or none kind of like, it doesn't work. And when you look at more successful communities like the API community or the Jewish community, the way they go across creating allies, I believe, is pretty intelligent. And the way it's done is by creating positions all the way across the board. Number one, you want to empower Arabs, you want our voices to matter. I believe it starts on the lower level, meaning water board positions, school board positions, city council positions. When it comes to issues, yes, Katie Porter is not going to support us. The reason is, and I say not us on all issues, but especially on Palestine. Palestine is a very unpopular issue. I know for all of us it's like number one, but I believe everything in inches, right? And so I think our community should not put all our resources into somebody like Katie Porter, for example, that we know will not support Palestine, but we shouldn't ignore her either. We should still have those conversations with her, so that way they can consider us whenever they make a decision. The reason Arab Americans aren't considered, or Muslim Americans or any other minority communities, because we're not there in the conversation. And you need to have those conversations, like you gentlemen both pointed, at the lower level. So on HR 2590, it's a bill, it's a resolution that I actually worked on getting support the Democratic Party on via counties. So we worked on San Bernardino, Orange County, because I don't know if you know how the party structure works. I'm going to speak on Democratic Party. I'm not saying ADC supports the Democratic Party. Don't worry about that. So you would go, and I had discussions behind the scenes, and I got votes to be taken place where people voted to support HR 2590. What does that mean? It means that they can push our Congress members from that region, from those counties, right, that would represent that specific area, to support it. So it is a step-by-step thing, and like he said, Menendez speaking against it, but still saying Israel has a right to support themselves. It's a step. I believe he did it because it was very unpopular what Israel did, and they had to say something. They did. I think it's reaching a point where people have to say something. What I'm going to advise my community, and I think you gentlemen would probably say the same, speak up. Just because a representative upsets you, it doesn't mean you stop calling. Be polite. Always be polite, and never, ever give up. We are lucky we're in a country where we can have an opinion. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Nicholas Dibbs here. I want to echo what she just said, which is we have to back the candidates for school board, for water board, city council, and so on. And I want to ask this, and I've tried to get the ADC to start backing candidates, and the NAAA, National Association of Arab Americans, merged with the ADC, and the NAAA wing is supposed to be able to back candidates, endorse them, give them money. So when people like myself run for school board or somebody runs for city council, the branch of the ADC that was part of the NAAA, which can back candidates, needs to do so. So are you folks, as an organization, ignoring that wing that was supposed to be the money from the NAAA? There was supposed to be an entity within or part of the ADC that can actually endorse candidates and give them money. So can you do that?
We cannot endorse candidates because we're a 501c3 organization.
No, this is the non-501c3 part.
Yeah, we traditionally speaking, the ADC has never supported, endorsed any candidates whatsoever. We do not get involved. Well, we get involved in regards to elections, as we get involved in election protection. We do not get involved in any specifics. We do not do fundraisers for organizations because that's not something that we have traditionally done. We do advocacy work on Capitol Hill, and that's where the NAAA arm of the ADC does do. That's Chris's job when we do advocacy. But candidates, we've never done that, and I don't think we ever will. A lot of that has to do with the fact that we want to safeguard our 501c3 status, which prevents us from endorsing any party or candidates.
Okay,
whether
respectfully, I understand what a 501c3 is. However, the 501c3 regulations by the government is preventing organizations from helping candidates. So you set up either a PAC.
But there are other organizations within our community that do such a thing. It's just, this is not what we do. So we believe in allowing those organizations that do that, let them make the condolences and let them do that.
Thank you. Over here. On the negative side, I'd like to start by saying when it comes to elections, money counts, and that's all that matters so far. If you take our population, how much they donate together to candidates compared to the other side, we're not even 1 to 100. We're at big disadvantage, and that's why, unfortunately, our system is directed by big money, and they win hands down. On the bright side, the recent poll about the evangelical in the U.S. that was a major supporter to Israel, young evangelical now, that used to be 6% of them in support of Palestinian, 94% or the Palestinian issue, and 94% against the Palestinian issue, pro-Israel, now has gone up to 30% from 6% in the young evangelicals. You take in every party now, Democratic or Republicans, the young populations are, with the social media, with the all the interaction, are more and more opposed to the atrocities committed by the Israelis against the Palestinians. You look at the Labour Party in the UK, despite Coburn was kicked out as the leader of the Labour Party at the recent meeting last week, they voted pro-BDS, pro-Palestine, pro all this, despite the action of Zionists to really prohibit him from doing so. So this is the bright side. We are currently at the lower level. That's what we are doing, all of us, through events like this and many other events of organizations, small or big. Cracks are showing in the dam. And we are seeing major improvement, though it is slow. I'd like to see it at much faster level. But let's face it, if we're going to compare dollar to dollar, we failed miserably. But if you compare on grassroots organization and grassroots level, we're doing very decent job. Of course, we can do much better. And that's the moral of the story, unfortunately. Can you add anything to that?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Public opinion across the board, you have seen shift, and it's going in our favor. It's going towards the side of human rights, of Palestinian rights. You're seeing that across the board, especially with young people. The media doesn't have as much of a stranglehold on what information is coming out of the Middle East. Social media is helping us promote the real stories of what's going on. I think that the idea of progress, we all want progress to happen like that, just like Samar said, like a light switch. But we also have to understand that progress, particularly on a national level, we push and we don't stop pushing. But if we don't want to, it's like a rubber band. You don't want to push too hard, otherwise it's going to break and it's going to come back at us. We don't want that. We want to keep pushing forward so that we will get what we need, what our community needs, which is peace, which is civility, which is being treated like the humans that we are.
I think the other key statistic that we're also seeing, Sohail, which you missed, is the change in the trend even among the Jewish American community, who is going away from they actually are seeing Israel for what it is, and they are now becoming more and more pro-Palestinian as well. So the trend is going in our direction, but usually the last group of people that makes the move are the members of Congress. They like to stay the safe route, and until things really kind of affect them, they're gonna always go conservatively because they're trying to preserve their own jobs. But I think what Mervat said is very important. It's about dialogue, and if you cut that dialogue off and stop it, and no longer have that dialogue, then you've basically just silenced yourself and you've turned off your voice. You don't have to agree with them. You just have to have that conversation with them and to discuss it with them. And you cannot, they can ignore you, but you should never ignore them. And you should be persistent. If they are ignoring you, you need to be even louder and more persistent. But you need to continue that dialogue. And I think you're right about the writing the checks, but a lot of people can't. But you need to get out there and get involved. You need to volunteer for those campaigns. And to be honest with you, you don't have to be a citizen to volunteer. You can be a green card holder, and you could go out there and volunteer for that campaign. And if you volunteer at the lower level, when they're becoming the Board of Ed, or they're becoming the member of the city council, that's when you establish the relationship. That's when they need you the most. So that when they then decide to run for Congress, they know you as a friend and as an ally. Okay, and you're not starting from the top. That's as important.
I'm just going to introduce, she has a quick question, but it's an important one. Buki Domingos, who's founded the Racial Justice Coalition in San Diego, and she's originally from Nigeria. And she made a comment to me, and I want to encourage her to ask this question.
Before we go on, we'll take this one more because we're running out of time, and I know Majid has been trying to, we'll take the two, you okay? Okay, then we'll have one more question, and then we'll wrap it up and go for the next session. So why don't you go ahead?
So I just wanted to piggyback off what somebody had said earlier on. How do you draw an allyship? I remember the lady over there with 2 children, 2 girls. Everything she spoke about, it sounded funny, everybody seemed entertained, but I'm from Nigeria, and the exact same thing happens over there. What I'm trying to say is our demographics and where we're located might be different, but our struggles, especially as women, is pretty much the same. How do you draw in allyship? I'm here because our organization has built relationship with ADC in San Diego. We are here to support and here to help, but listening to the whole conference all day, I cannot help but feel very excluded. And I keep hearing how marginalized the Arab community is, and I think of myself as an immigrant and a survivor of violence, and I cannot help but feel the same struggles. So when you have these conferences, how do you ensure that it's holistic and those who want to be allies who share the same struggles in different parts of the world feel included? And also, one last comment. There was a comment about Palestinians in freeing Palestine. We have been to protests. I mean, everybody knows from San Diego in support. But at the same time, parallel to this, Haitians are struggling. And I don't think that was even acknowledged in this space at all. And they are Black and they're immigrants. And I do definitely believe they are absolutely at the bottom of the food chain.
Thank you. It's incredible. Your point about allyship is very well put and well taken. You know, this conference specifically, we can always be better, and we will always strive to be better. I know that in the work that I'm doing, what I strive to do is to never deny help. If somebody is there saying that they support our causes, or we agree on, it doesn't have to be the Palestinian issue. It could be any one of the issues that we all care about. But if we're all agreeing on where we want to go, there's no reason for us to work on separate paths, because we're all going to the same place. So I always I'm trying to create coalitions, to create spaces so that everyone's voice can, one, be heard, but that we're all also getting to a goal that is equitable for everybody. And if we haven't been as open to the other issues, to other groups that are part of our world, today I apologize, and we will work to be better at that. Your point about the Black Haitians and the issue of Haitian deportations is so important, and it puts a fine point on why we all need to be advocating for better out of this administration. That they may say the right things, but when it comes down to brass tacks, to their actions, if they don't do the right thing, their words mean nothing. And so when we advocate, when we call and when we meet and we have any sort of session with the administration, we need to make sure that we are following up, that we are pressing for accountability, because that's the only way that we are going to move forward in this world.
Just real quick, it is very important, and we've tried to and sort of work with other communities on their issues as well. Our philosophy, we've tried to have a philosophy as, well, we can't ask somebody for their help unless we've also offered our help as well. So a lot of the things we do in coalition. So for example, that's what's called TPS, Temporary Protective Status, that the DHS gives to various countries because that country is in various states of disarray. We work in a coalition together, so we take the lead when it comes to TPS versus Arab countries. But yet, when we're dealing with countries in Latin America, and you know, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and when their TPS is up for renewal, we allow their organizations to take the lead, but we assist them in any way they need. So we lend our voices to their petition to get their TPS renewed. The same thing with Haiti. When Haiti was up for TPS status renewal last administration, we also stepped up and tried to help the Haitian organizations. Of course, we always allow them to lead, but we then assist in any way they'd like us to do. But that's what we've been trying to do more and more. When the situation happened in Baltimore, which is right up the road from Washington, D.C., our lawyers, this is regarding the Black Lives Matter movement in Baltimore, and all the demonstrations that happened there, we actually sent our lawyers up to Baltimore to work on the ground and represent individuals that were arrested. The same thing was what happened when St. Louis, the situation in St. Louis, we also sent our attorneys there to assist there. So we're always trying to help, but like as Chris said, we're not perfect, and we always try to strive and do better.
Last question.
Thank you. Samar, you mentioned the Menendez statement during the May attack, and I found it shocking and miraculous when it happened. Can you give us any window or any knowledge you have of how that came about? Whether there was lobbying, whether it was a campaign, whether it was just spontaneous? I'd like to know.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I think it was an act of God. Because look, I've known Menendez since he was a mayor in New Jersey, and I've met with him on countless occasions. And when he ran for Congress, he decided to take a very Zionist tract. And when he ran for Senate, he became even a bigger Zionist. But we consistently met with him, and that was the one area that we could not get through to him. I think so. I don't think it was a matter of lobbying in his case. I think it was a matter of this was so bad. what they were doing, that he had to say that he finally realized, wait a minute, something is wrong here. So he kind of gave that one in, one out. So he sort of made that statement, but at the same time he wanted to protect himself. And so it's kind of like, you know, what good was that statement? You made one step forward, but like 5 steps back.
So you're saying it was like it shocked his conscience?
I don't know. I don't know what his motivation was, and I'm just guessing at it, because his statement came out of nowhere. But I think I don't want to be naive about it and say, oh my God, he's now all of a sudden he's pro-Palestine. He's not. He's pro-Zionist, and he's going to be that way. But I thought it was that it showed some glimmer of hope that we can maybe get some movement somewhere else in other people.
But on the Iran deal, it's not like he's going to...
Oh, he's horrible. I don't know what more you want. I mean, that's the honest to goodness truth. And he's bad on Iran. Why? Because of Israel. Yes.
When money talks, bullshit walks.
I just want to put
look, he made his bed, and that's where he thought was the best way to succeed, was to take that approach.
And I want to put a finer point on that, you know, that whatever his motivations were, that's illustrative of where public opinion is going, that he felt that he needed to make a statement. And it also helps us when, you know, when we talk to offices, even if we know that they are bad on this issue or that issue or whatever, we have conversations and we work to find ways to bring them in. We don't want to exclude somebody, and I will, with one caveat, you know, if somebody is neo-Nazi, no, you were done, I exclude you. But if someone is willing to have a conversation, I will have a conversation. And that's what it comes down to.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll take a little bit break, and then we're going to start with our next panel on Palestine.
Perfect.